Welcome to the Grateful American Radio Show, hosted by author and publisher David Bruce Smith. What did George Washington do that you might not know about? What did Abe Lincoln know that could change the way you think about the Civil War? You'll learn about all that and more on this special show designed to restore excitement in American history. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Grateful American Radio Show. This series is an interactive multimedia program designed to restore enthusiasm in American history for children and grown-ups too. The hosts for the show are DC author and publisher David Bruce Smith, creator of the Grateful American series, and I'm your co-host, Hope Katz-Gibbs, founder of Incandescent Public Relations and Incandescent Radio Network. So hi, David. Welcome to your show.
Hi, Hope. I'm really excited to be here because we are interviewing Adam Goodheart, author of 1861 and the upcoming 1865.
Yes, Adam is an amazing historian, essayist, and journalist. His articles have appeared in National Geographic, Smithsonian, The Atlantic, and the New York Times Magazine, among others. In fact, he's a regular columnist for the Times' acclaimed Civil War series. It's Disunion, is that right, Adam?
That's right.
He lives here in D.C., as we do, and he's on Maryland's Eastern Shore, where he is the director of Washington College's C.V. Starr Center for the Study of the American Experience. So welcome to the Grateful American series.
It's so great to be here.
Thank you. Now, before we launch into our Q&A, we want to tell our listeners a little bit about 1861, the Civil War awakening. This is a gripping and original account of how the Civil War began, and is an epic of courage and heroism beyond the battlefields. Early in that fateful year of 1861, a second American Revolution unfolded, inspiring a new generation to reject their parents' faith in compromise and appeasement, and do the unthinkable in the name of an ideal. It set Abraham Lincoln on the path to greatness, and millions of slaves on the road to freedom. So Adam, let's talk about your book. It introduces us to a heretofore little-known cast of Civil War heroes, among them an acrobatic militia colonel, an explorer's wife, an idealistic band of German immigrants, a regiment of New York City firemen, and a young college professor who would one day become president. So tell us, what inspired you to write 1861?
Well, it actually started with a sort of discovery of buried treasure, almost literally buried treasure. And it also started from my work as a teacher, as a college teacher out on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And if you've been to the Eastern Shore, you know that it's this sort of land that time forgot, an area with lots of old crumbling plantation houses and little colonial village kind of tucked away along these tidal rivers. So when I'm teaching American history out there, I love to take my students out exploring the environment, exploring these places where you really feel history come alive. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I took one of my classes to one of these old plantation houses, a place that had been in the same family since the 1600s, more than 13 generations in this one family. And as we roamed through this old brick house, we found in the attic all of these boxes and barrels and old steamer trunks stuffed with family papers. And there were about 13 generations of family papers, so they ranged from land records from the 1660s up to like somebody's credit card statements from the 1980s. It was all jumbled up together. But mixed up in this treasure trove, we found a bundle of letters from the spring of 1861, letters that had been written by a man who lived on this plantation and who was trying to figure out what it all meant as the country fell apart, as the South seceded, as Maryland, where he lived, considered whether to be a Union state or a Confederate state. And as my students and I read through these letters that hadn't been read in 150 years, they were tied up in this bundle with silk ribbon that clearly hadn't been undone since the 19th century. As we read this, it just brought that moment to life, and I realized that I wanted to write a book about it.
Wow.
How did you know who to bundle together? Mm-hmm. You have James Garfield, who became president.
Every book needs James Garfield. I mean, the man is just obviously the most fascinating American president.
Jesse Fremont.
Yep. The famous,
the wife
of the famous explorer, John
How
Fremont.
did you, I mean, it's an odd Abner Doubleday. It's an odd. No, it's not odd. It's an eclectic group.
Good, that's a good word, David. An eclectic, I like that. Eclectic cast of characters. Well, my background as a writer, rather than being a traditional academic historian, I got started as a journalist. And when you're a journalist, as you know, you have to be ready to walk into a place, walk into a room, and just have that sort of sixth sense almost of who are going to be the interesting people here to talk to? Who are the people I really want to interview for my story? And that's kind of my approach as a historian. I sort of step into that room, that foreign country of a moment in the past, and I look around for the people who intrigue me. And it's almost something that, I don't know, it's almost just an instinctive thing that I feel. So I didn't expect to write about James Garfield, for instance, at all. I mean, I always thought James Garfield was one of the most boring sort of 19th century presidents. I just knew him as a guy who had a big bushy beard.
And you called him ugly.
No, he was handsome, actually.
In the book, he's described as ugly, I think.
No, well,
or maybe somebody said he was ugly.
Yeah, maybe somebody thought so. But no, he was considered to be pretty handsome. But I thought of him as this guy who was president for about 5 minutes, then was shot by a madman, and that was it. Well, just in reading around about what was going on in 1861, I started coming across excerpts from his letters and diaries that just made it clear that at that moment, 20 years before he was president, he was just an ordinary young American man in his 20s trying to figure out what it all meant, similar to the man in the plantation house I discovered, trying to figure out what this war was going to be, what it would mean for his personal future and the future of the country. And his personality and his words really just pulled me in, and he became a character in my book, and people have said he's one of the more exciting characters in the book.
So what is it about the Civil War that's so important for everyone to understand, especially for kids?
Well, the Civil War, for one thing, I think it's really great to read about and understand because it's just such an amazing story. I'm a believer that history is all about storytelling, and we look not just for the things that are significant with a capital S or influential when you look at what's happening in the current times, but also just for the great epic stories. And the Civil War really has it all. It has amazing characters from Lincoln and Grant and Frederick Douglass and so many greater and lesser known heroes that it's sort of one of these stories like the Iliad and the Odyssey, these ancient Greek myths that we keep telling and retelling through the generations and across the centuries and across thousands of years just because they speak to us so much as human beings. And I think that also speaks to an idea that the Civil War is important because it really cuts to our identity as Americans. As Americans, we don't all share the same ethnic background, we don't all share the same religion, we don't all share the same political ideas, but what we all share is the same history. We share this set of stories that whether our ancestors came here 300 years ago on the Mayflower or whether they got off the plane from Vietnam 5 years ago, that's what makes us all American, these stories. And that's why I think it's something that's very important for Americans of every background, of every belief, and of all ages to share and understand.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that the Civil War was the beginning of civil rights?
I don't think it was the beginning of civil rights in America because, of course, people have been fighting for civil rights since the very beginning in various ways. People have been fighting for rights within this new, not before it was even a new nation.
But I mean in a
within the new
formal
world.
way.
But I think that the Civil War marked a major turning point in the struggle for civil rights. It really marked the moment when the struggle against slavery became a struggle over what is the definition of citizenship going to be in our country. And it's amazing to think that even the people who believed in the American slaves having their freedom, many of them didn't think that African Americans should be or could be citizens. They thought that people of African descent, just for various reasons, should be excluded, must be excluded forever from becoming Americans. And so for African Americans, the Civil War wasn't just about gaining freedom, it was also about gaining citizenship. And that's what in the end, they managed to do to a significant degree, but then that was taken away from them to a significant degree as well. And the next 100 years becomes really the story, more than 100 years, becomes really the story of making sure that the promise of what was given in the Civil War would be fully fulfilled and realized. So you're absolutely right. This was a moment, it was a watershed for civil rights, and that really set the course of a lot of American history for the next 100 or 150 years.